Most of the goated authors out there worked careers for decades before they found literary fame, or they never found fame during their lifetime at all. One of the goats, Miss Toni Morrison, didn't publish her first novel until 39 years old. And to get that novel out, she had to wake up at 4 a.m. every day just to write for an hour or two before taking care of her couple children and then working a full-time job. There are countless examples that we're going to be talking about today where authors grinded out career accomplishments and at the same time grinded out their books. Does anybody in here like Pringles? I honestly don't. But one of the engineers who created an early machine that made Pringles was one of the fantasy goats, Mr. Gene Wolfe. And Gene Wolfe didn't retire from his engineering job until his 50s. And Wolfe is known, he's released a ton of novels. They're usually huge, they're very complicated. And on top of all this, he had a family with kids, and his brain, I'm sure, was racked every day after he came home from his engineering job, because that's what happens a lot of the time. We think that we don't have any energy reserves. I have a career. I go to work every day. When I get home at like 4 or 4:30, the house is dirty, no food ready, my cat wants to play, people want to hang out. Suddenly there's all this pressure not to do the things that you want to do. And I'll be honest, for the last decade of my life, I've wasted most of that time. Most of those opportunities, I have not taken them. But if you work 40 hours a week and sleep 8 hours a night, you will still have 78 hours a week left to do whatever you want. And that is more than enough time to be able to finish at least one novel a year. Because if you write a novel for about 2 hours a day, or a poetry book or a nonfiction book, so that's 14 hours a week, so then you have 64 hours a week left. That is more than enough to get that book out at least in a year, and easily in 2 years. And it could be highly edited. There could be multiple drafts. And if we add on top all the time you'll be thinking about it throughout the day, and if you put digital copies on your phone and at work or other places, you can maybe make some sentence changes or tinker with some stuff. There is no excuse for a 21st century human anymore not to be able to release these works. Publish books if they want to. And what happens though is that most people resist the grind. Most people resist that pain because it's going to be hard. You're going to have to make these sacrifices. But what if Stephen King just settled with being a high school English teacher or a janitor? What if Luke Skywalker just said, hey, I'm going to be a farmer? And that's what most people are doing. Most people aren't standing up and writing their death poems and taking a risk. Some of my favorite modernists, William Carlos Williams was a doctor. T.S. Eliot was a banker. During when they wrote their most prestigious works, they were working full-time jobs, and William Carlos Williams said that helped him. That helped keep him measured. And this is an idea more so from the East. That for instance, the Chinese wilderness poets most of the time worked normal careers and lives, and they raised a family, and then in 50 or 60 they left their homes and went out into the woods to live the rest of their days writing poetry. And that's actually a really good thing, because if you aren't trying to write some postmodern experimental groundbreaking novel, you could technically start your writing career in your 50s or your 60s and still release some really good work, especially if you keep it more on the simple but deep side. And during the intermittent time, right, during your 20s, 30s, 40s, when you are juggling a career and a job and all these, I think they're excuses. But if people want to do that, then you will have this time at the end of your life. But what happens? No one ever does that. We never see these writers in their 50s and 60s. Well, I guess you do. If you go to any writing group, there's always a bunch of old people. Most writing groups in America right now are just filled with old people who were regretful about not writing earlier, about not doing this earlier. And now they have the time to do it. So never mind. Don't become one of those people. If your wife, your kids, your boss, your parents, or whoever doesn't appreciate you wanting to read more, to write more, to explore your artistic side, then it's time to fire them. Something is unaligned there, because real people want you to expand. They want you to grow. They want you to push as hard as you can towards your dreams, because we are all experiencing mortality. And if they are so caught up in the simulation that they can't see outside of that and understand that you are trying to do something that maybe is going to not just immortalize you, but help millions of others over maybe hundreds of years, and if you're really good, thousands, then why are you involved with them anyway? And a lot of the reasons that people get involved with jobs and relationship partners and friends that hold them back is the same reason they don't write in the first place. Because I've seen people who've gotten rid of all that. They've quit their job. Like, for instance, I know a guy. This happens all the time in MFA programs. I know so many people who went into an MFA program, got their tuition waived, got paid $20,000 a year, moved away from their family, broke up with their girlfriend because they got to come to school in a different state. And at the end of the 3 years, where the sole focus was to write, for instance, a poetry book with 50 poems, they didn't have 50 poems after 3 years. They had 5 poems, 10 poems. And it's because the same reasons that you tolerate negativity are the same reasons that stop creativity from coming out and write and create writer's block. And if you guys are interested in learning more about how to break free of writer's block, I have a whole podcast about that over here. Peace.